When Ernest Hemingway was asked about writing, one of the things he said was, there is nothing to writing. All you have to do is sit at the typewriter and bleed. Now, the first part of the statement says, writing is so easy. There's really nothing about it. We just overcomplicate it. And then the last part of the sentence, he tells us that all we have to sit to do is to bleed. Well, I don't really believe you, young man, because you tell me that it is easy, but why do we have to bleed? Because anything that has to draw blood from me is not easy. It is not something that I would just do without thinking twice. Because we're talking about my blood here. I'm bleeding. And now this is not, you're not just taking blood. You said I should bleed. And every time I hear the word bleed, I'm scared. Because something is happening. Someone is about to die. Now, we struggle as writers. We find writing difficult. And for me, I'm like, why should I even talk about the difficulty of writing? Are you a writer? Yeah. Well, probably because I find writing difficult in a way. And in this episode, I want to talk about the why writing is difficult, the difficulty of writing. And well, let's get into it. Hi everyone, my name is Oyemi Chinwakonam, and you're welcome to the Buildwriting podcast. In the difficulty of writing, it's in two folds. There is the pre-writing, and there is the writing itself. Now, for most people, writing is difficult in that they find it really hard to sit and write. There's so much of writer's block in the mind. As much as they try, they just can't get themselves to write it. Because there are different voices, there are different reasons, there are different suggestions that the resistance is giving for them not to write. A couple of them could be, you're not good enough. Yeah. There's really no need to bother writing. You're not good enough. You can't write anything significant. You can't write anything good. Why bother yourself? You might as well just relax. And we look at the resistance and we're like, yeah. Well, the resistance is saying the truth. We're not good enough. Like we've written certain things in the past and they're really terrible. So we then ask ourselves, should we really continue? But here's where the paradigm, here's where the paradox is. You're not good enough, so you don't write. And because you don't write, you never get good enough. Because you never get it good enough, you never write. Because you're not good enough. We are not good enough. It is in writing that we become good enough. I look at other feeds and let's say you choose to pursue music, and at first when you start you're not really good at singing, you find yourself, what happens? You with practice, improving different techniques, you get better at singing, you get better at finding the key. You don't just say, oh, I'm not good at singing, well, most people say they're not going to sing, and so they don't sing. Yeah, there's people who really don't want to sing, but there are people who desperately want to sing, they love to sing. But at first, they're not just coming off right off as best and most talented. And with training, they become to perfect and to refine their skill and get really good at singing. So it's same with writing. We're not good enough. And so we're not writing because we're good enough. We're writing so we can be good enough. You get it? So when you see to write, oh, you're not good enough, don't bother writing. You're like, no. It's because I'm not good enough. That's why I'm writing. So that I can be good enough to write even better stories. And then there are other that tell me like, oh, I don't have ideas. And sometimes you might have ideas, but you're not good at writing the ideas well enough. Sometimes the ideas might come, but you attempt at writing it just makes it seem as if the idea is the most terrible idea we've ever seen in our life. So in fast forward, writing is difficult because of the mind. With writer's block. That's what we call writer's block. We just can't get ourselves to write. We just don't feel inspired enough to write. We just don't feel it. It's not there. The muse doesn't speak to us. It doesn't whisper to us. And everyone has a different opinion towards that aspect of writing. But I feel most times it's because writing is more of a thing of the mind. That's why we are plagued with writer's block and all that. Because most other professions are not that plagued with writer's block and also whatever block they are, painter's block, musician's block. Because it's that straightforward. All they have to say to do is to do what they have to do. But writing, we are our enemy. We're in our mind. We're telling ourselves so many reasons that we can't do it, that we can't become the writer we want to be. And for most people, like, okay, I have no ideas. Well, how do you find the ideas? Well, we could start with mining our life with ideas. You see, no matter how boring your life might be, there are ideas. And one of the rule I say is the reality rule. For me, the reality rule is how can we create our reality? And one of the things with the superpowers of a writer is the ability to create a different reality. You see, you might have the most boring life you have ever had. And then you're like, wait, what makes it boring? Someone will come to your life and say, wow, your stories are so unique. I wish I had your story. I would have become a writer. I would definitely want to write that story. And you're like, what about your life? My life is totally boring. And you're like, boy, my life is boring too. I don't know what was so interesting about my life that you want to write about. Yeah. What, so at both ends, both argue that, oh, my life is more boring than your life. But your life is interesting. My life is boring. Your life is interesting. And from the outside perspectives, you have a great life. Well, it might be true that your life is totally boring, though I've never seen that before. Well, that's good. If it's boring, what does not being boring means to you? Create that reality. No one says you have to write about your life. Your fiction. That's why there's the genre of writing called fiction. Yeah. Create that level of life that you do not find boring. Make it be. Like, I like that the sun comes out every day. What if the sun shines all day? It doesn't have to go down in the night. Well, you can create a story where the sun shines all through the day. Or maybe a story where there is no sun and the people just grew up in darkness. And well, if there's no sun, well, you have to look at a lot of things because if there's no sun, how the plants survive? How would all the things work? So you have to factor those into consideration. But it will be a lovely story because if there is no sun, it means that life on Earth is numbered, like really numbered. In a few days, did I say a few days? I don't know how long it will take, but very, very soon people just be extinct and everybody will just die. Every living thing will die. Because as much as we like, oh, the sun, we depend on the sun for survival. Like, how do I mean? Um, the plants need the sun in order to make their food and convert and do all those things they need. Uh-huh. So if there is no sun, all the plants will die, all the plants will wither, yeah, all the plants will just, fade out. So if all the plants die, there will be no food for the herbivores to eat. And if there is no food for the herbivores to eat, well, just give them some time. After a couple of days of fasting, they'll die too. And if there's no food for the herbivores to eat, the chickens, all these other animals to eat. Well, we don't have plants to eat. We don't have animals to eat. What else can we eat? Well, it's just a matter of time when we don't have food to eat too. Well, we do have food in storage, but that would go into that we'll be exhausted, and then we'll be struggling for our survival too. So it will be a great story if there is no sun. And I'm like, well, how would then will people survive? Or maybe for some reason people can come out to the sun and I don't know. It depends on whatever the story is. But you can create your reality. You walk up a day and you see a lady you wanted to talk to her, but you weren't able to talk to her. And or you create a reality where you talk to her and she insulted you. You create a reality when you talk to her and she was like, wow, that was awesome. I agreed. And you said all the words you were not bold enough to say. you can create a reality. And each time I realize that, I'm like, what would a great story be? What would an inspiring story be? What could go wrong? And we recreate that stuff. That's for the mindset. And for the mindset, it's more of, how about we shift the perspective of, oh yeah, I am not a very good writer. I'm not so good. I do not have the skills and the techniques to write it. How about we shift that and say, okay, I am a professional. I show up to my craft. And I wanted to say I show up to work, but that might be misunderstood to mean you have a full-time job as a writer. Because not all of us have full-time jobs. Most of us, we have other jobs that we do, and writing is just one of those things that we do um in our free time. Or let's say, yeah, no free time, that's what we do. So you sit down, you show up to write. And there was a book I read by Seth Godin called The Practice. And he said the work we do is important. So we show up. The work is not the goal. The practice is the goal. And I looked at it as much as it seems counterintuitive, the practice is what creates the work. There will be no work without the practice. And so if the practice becomes our goal, if it becomes what we seek to do as writers, then in just a couple of time, there will be works all around. We'll become so prolific that people will be asking themselves, how does he even manage to do it? Because most writers don't show up on time. Yeah, sometimes the work takes a long time, but you have to show up to keep working at it. I think that's the most important thing. Sometimes the work might come out so fast, sometimes not so fast. But the great thing is you have to keep showing up. That's what's important. That's what the practice is all about. Yeah. So when we reframe our mind from, oh, I need to write so story, to, okay, I need to write so hours. It's sacred. I can't do any other thing that's hard, and I have to show up to write. It becomes a different game entirely. I'm speaking and I'm like, sometimes I feel that writing consistently, it's it's one miracle. Yeah. I wonder how people do it. Yeah, I just wonder how people do it. Yeah, but I believe that this year will be my year of a lot of changes and a lot of growth. Now, I know that, the moment when you know that you're not growing because, not because things are fortunate for you, but because you've not been putting in your own quota. And I know I get it that people put in their quota, people writing, but their work are not accepted. They just can't figure it out yet. Yeah, those kinds of persons, and we'll talk about them in this episode. But there are those of us that we know that if we get to start writing, uh, it's not like anything. It's not like we're saying anything, but if we had to put a mind to sit and start writing, this writing of a thing, this, let's say the beast, whatever, will be tamed and have dominion over it. Yeah, basically that's it. And there are other form of writers, the writers who are not good enough. Yeah, I think I saw one of Kurt Vonnegut's quotes, and it was like he wrote a letter to a young writer. It was, I think, in a magazine. He rejected his work, and he was like, "I rejected your work because one of two things: either your work is so good I just cannot see the brilliance, or your work is terrible, and I could be making a mistake." And at that point, I was like, so you might not be so sure of what you are saying. And look at other works. There's certain works that will be rejected, but then they go on to be published, and the people are like, oh, it's one of the greatest book of a century. That book completely revolutionized the culture, the literature of the world, or probably the country, or whatever, wherever the work was published. And so when the work was rejected, you're like, oh, the work is not good enough. Oh, I'm terrible. Okay. Yeah, most of us, we know that we're not so good. Yeah. Like, the work is not good. Yeah, we do. But the question is, how then do we become good? How then do we begin to see the writing? as we should see it so that we can make the necessary changes and create polished and excellent work. First, I feel that if we see that our work is not good and we're able to recognize that our work is not good, it is a sign it's good. Yeah. Because isn't that where reading comes in? We read works and we've read some great works that when we read them, we're like, wow, that book is fantastic. We read some other works that when we read them, we do not really enjoy it, but we're like, wow, I see the brilliance in it, but the work was not for me. Like this is a masterpiece, but it was not for me. You get it? And then there are other works where you're like, ah, God, how did they even write this thing? This is complete garbage. And most of the times when you read bad writing, you get instructions on on the how not to write bad writing. Exactly what bad writing looks like, feels like. And so you start asking yourself, how then can I write my own? Now you can recognize good writing, you can recognize bad writing. But what makes it good and bad, you just cannot tell. But you're like, oh, this is brilliant. I say I love it. You know, people that oh, these are the laws, these are the stuff and all those things. But we've had writers who break those laws and the work is still great, it's still fantastic. But also, what do you say about those laws that have been broken? I don't know. I wasn't the one who broke the laws in the first place. Why should we ask him about those laws that have been broken? Well, you have to know the laws before you break them and break them well and artistically. So you're not just breaking them anyhow. And it's art and not necessarily science per se, because with science, you could say, okay, you put H2O, you get water. You always get water in a controlled environment. H2O, it's water. But with art, it's a different game entirely. You might do it and not get anything. And then you start asking yourself, well, what? I thought you said H2O. Why am I going to do H? And oh, and I'm not getting anything. Well, it's a that. That's where it's different. Yeah. So as we looked at it, how then can we make our work better? Well, the first thing is we need feedback, and not just any kind of feedback. We need feedback that is familiar for people who are in the game, so they can make us see what we do not see. I think part of the dilemma of being a writer is you just don't know what you don't know. And if you knew what you knew, you'd probably improve in it. Let's say if you're good at dialogue, if you're terrible at dialogue, you will say, "Oh, I'm really good, terrible at dialogue. That's why my story is not making sense. How do I make my dialogue better?" And then you go read books and listen to other writers and you practice and do some dialogue experiments. And then over time, you get the hang of it. But if you don't know that dialogue is your problem in the first place, how are you going to improve on it? So that's where an editor comes into pointed out for us. Now, how do we, because getting an editor, it's really expensive for most writers. So how do we get that editor? Well, for me, my intention is write some works, submit it to magazines that offer you feedback for free, probably for a token. And then if I have good money, I would send my works to professional writers that offer editing for paid editing. Now, the editing and the feedback would not cost that much because I write short prose and poems. Yeah. Or like if I was to write a novel book and they're like, oh, $200, $1,000. I'm like, no, not really. I don't think I can do that. No, I've changed my mind. Don't worry, don't worry. Some other time, please. But the short story versions. Well, one interesting experiment I was thinking of is how about if I have the money out, write the same piece of work, just one or let's say one or two, and that same piece of work, send it to like 5 different editors from different backgrounds, from different places, and we may wonder where will you see those editors. You can see them in different places. You can see them on Fiverr, though I don't really trust those for Fiverr work. You can see some professional editing services. You can see some different companies. You can look for other writers. You can reach out to magazines, like different places. You see professional editors for people who are in the game, and then send them my work. And when I send them my work, I would love to see what these 5 to 10 editors will send back to me because it's the same work we're talking about. I really want to see this feedback of a thing is really, really something that it exists, or maybe it's just a gimmick, because then if it's the same work, I should expect uh, the same feedback, maybe not the same, but close feedback. Oh, this part of your work is terrible. I'm like, oh yeah, this is it, said this is it, said. I think there's a pattern there. Other than I just see 5 different or 10 different editors giving me 10 different stuff, and I'm like, are you really serious? Or is it that each one is limited to see just one of the errors? Well, that would be an interesting case study. Or I would have done it, but I just don't, the money's not there yet. So when I'm gathering a couple of bucks, once I'm able to get that, I would do the experiment, and I love to see what what it will be like. And then, of course, if you're not subscribed to whatever platform you're listening to the podcast from, please do subscribe, because I would talk about the experiment on this podcast. Yeah. And so the first thing is we have to get feedback, which I've talked about for not being a good writer. And the second thing is you have to get training. Now, we could train ourselves. Yeah, we could practice the writing. We could read a lot. And one of the things that Stephen King said, he said, above all things, above all advice, there are two things to becoming a writer: read a lot and write a lot. Read a lot and write a lot. I feel that when you read it long enough, you seem to be getting the hang of the game. And then when you write a lot, you get to practice what you've read. Yeah. And you build your marks. Writing is not like every other skill that you just get, like history, where you have to read a lot, cram a lot of dates, and know a lot of things. You probably think and analyze things, but majorly just read and cram those things. If you're really good at cramming and reading, you'll be okay. But writing, you have to write. And then you will have this great story in your head, but when you write it, you're like, this is an insult to my imagination. Yeah. I can't believe I created this. This was not what I imagined in my head. Absolutely not. Okay. So we could get trainings, but like, oh, now I'm not saying you have to take a creative writing degree, no. But I'm saying you could get a workshop, or you can watch tutorials on YouTube. Yeah. Yeah, or read a book on the craft. Then just get a hang of a couple of things and then practice. That's one way. The third way is to get accountability, because we talked about write a lot and read a lot, and the getting accountability. That's when we can go further. I think there's this phrase that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And yeah, that's where accountability comes in. You write, you share your work, just keep each other together. And I think there's a reason why peer pressure works, even though people know that we shouldn't be pressured. And for some reason, sometimes we're peer pressured into doing good and peer pressure into doing bad. And so we want to be intentional about the kind of peer pressure that we get. If I was to get the kind of peer pressure that would help me take my writing serious, show up as a writer, publish my work, edit, improve, follow up my ideas, write about the stories and the ideas that I get, that would be a very good kind of peer pressure. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't really happen. And so that's where accountability comes in. It's just a refined form of you choosing the peer pressure. So like, oh, we're going to write these things. And you don't want to be the bad guy, the unserious young man. Because with writing, it's more like the side stuff. It's not the main thing that we do for most writers. And so when we tell ourselves that we're going to write, and I tell myself that, oh, I'm going to write, I don't show up. Because nothing is going to happen. Yeah, if you don't show up that you want to write to yourself. Like life will go on. Yeah, it's not like it's a paid job that you get paid and be like, oh, no, you didn't show up to write, you don't survive for the month or anything, and nothing happens. It's your personal goal. It's to you. Yeah. And when we show up, we feel good about ourselves. But when we don't, we feel terrible that we're not even able to come to to show up for ourselves, to do that which we said we'll do. And it's not really what would I say now? It's not really good for us, because that feeling is really, really bad. So getting the accountability, joining a group. Well, one of the things I say about Facebook groups is that it's just so many. Like a lot of persons out there that it's not really targeted. Like accountability should be like a couple of persons, so 5 to 20 persons. Everybody knows everybody. That way, the peer pressure is really, really, really strong. You get, and we can get a focus on the like on each other. Unlike when we have 10,000 and everybody just posting stuff and stuff like that. Well, you could post, you could get ideas, you could ask questions, but nobody really knows you long enough for you to say, "Yeah, I'm not gonna write anything." And one thing I will ultimately not do is lie to myself. Yeah, I'll never do that. And because I don't want to lie to myself, I would have to do the work as a writer. Isn't that why peer pressure works? Because what I mean by lie to myself is if I tell myself I'm going to write a short story this week and I don't write that short story, I'm not going to say, oh, I wrote 3 short stories. Ah, that was great. This week was awesome. Well, it might seem that I'm lying to other people, but I know that I'm lying to myself and I don't want to do that. If I don't write the short story, I'll tell myself, I just say that I wasn't able to write the short story. Yeah, I really don't have excuse. I was, complete procrastinator or whatever. But I'll see what we can do next week. Yeah, I'll see what I can do next week. That would be better. Rather than I would really like who am I trying to impress? Ultimately, the impression that I'm trying to make is that of myself. That's the one that ultimately matters to me because I would get to live with myself for the rest of my life. So if I lie to myself, what would that mean to me? In an attempt to please others, I lie to myself. That is really bad. And deceive myself. That is really bad. So I've been looking at writing and I've been seeing where do we show up. And the first part I said, if we take it to practice, it's important. We'll be able to stay long enough to figure it out. Now, for some, it comes easily. For others, we have to like perspire. But I feel that most writers, what they face is not necessarily the writing of itself. Because writing is one of the easiest professions to get into. Just if you have a pencil and a paper, which is really cheap, you've started writing. You might not write the greatest artistic piece, but you can start writing your thoughts then that oh today I thought about this and this happened, and then moving up to stories and the imaginations and to words and characters and all those plots and conflicts. It is really, really that easy to get into. But then yeah, the problem is our mind. Or like, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm not inspired. Oh, the story is not for me. I just don't know what to do. That's it. Well, unlike other professions where you have to, do a lot of things. Like, okay, I'll give you an example. Of course, you have to be trained. You have to read a lot, write a lot to become a very, very good writer. But it's not like other professions that you just can't do anything. Like in medicine, what are you going to do in medicine? You're going to cut someone's stomach. They will just die. But at least with writing, you can write your thoughts. It's your thoughts. Yeah, it's your thoughts. So yeah, you can write your thoughts. So I'm thinking, well, if it's that difficult, how about we do it? Well, maybe we shouldn't be trying to say that. Uh, how do we make it less difficult? I'm just saying, I'm not like, oh, of course, I'd love it to be easy, but maybe it's what makes it worth it. Maybe we have to perspire. We have to wait for drops of sweat, of blood to form on our head. Maybe we have to do that. Maybe we have to write until everything becomes so clean and put. Maybe we have to keep showing up. Maybe it won't come that easy. Maybe we have to stay long enough for the muse to speak to us. Maybe, maybe being hard makes it worthwhile. Maybe it's not that hard. We're just making a big deal out of it. Maybe it wasn't even hard in the first place, but everybody we met, we saw, said it was hard. So we believed it to be hard. And so it is hard for us now. Maybe it's time for us to be serious about it and stop giving excuses. Maybe it's time for us to write terrible work. Like, what if our goal is to write terrible work? What happens? Like, uh, uh, yeah, well, we're already writing terrible work. So as long as we write whatever comes out, we're a winner because we We want to write terrible work. That's the goal. Yeah. If that's the goal, then I think our perspective towards writing will change. We won't necessarily start asking ourselves, oh, was the work good enough? Because now we're like, oh, you're going to write terrible work. Why are you so stressed about it? Just write. Okay, yeah, you have a point there. Yeah, that's true. I just write. And with time, I'll get to see how I make sense of the work. Well, it's been 30 minutes chatting with you about the difficulty of writing. And I'd love to hear your questions, your contributions. And please send them to buildwriting.com/speak. And I want to hear from you. Yeah, really want to hear from you. And I do believe that you found this episode useful. Please do subscribe to whatever platform you're listening on. And my name is Vino Yemishidwakona. I've been your host of this podcast, and I've been chatting outside. It's 6:21 in the morning, and I'm chatting, and it's kind of dark a bit. Some noises around from other persons hitting the football. I don't know why they do that this early in the morning, but yeah, it's been great chatting with you, and I just want to commit to showing up for you and for me too, because it means a lot to me. Until next time, keep writing.